Hello, everybody. Welcome to another ASG podcast. Today, we're going to discuss a recent technology review from the ASG Tech Committee. I'm joined by Andy Copland from University of Virginia and Sonali Sakaria from Emory. So the Technology Committee from ASGE is responsible for providing reviews of existing, new, or emerging endoscopic technologies and techniques that have an impact on the current and future practice of GI endoscopy. These technology status evaluation reports are put together using evidence-based methods with the Medline literature search to identify any pertinent clinical studies on the topic, as well as the MAUDE database to search and identify reported adverse events of a given technology. Both are then supplemented by accessing related articles within PubMed and scrutinizing pertinent references cited by those identified studies. We aim to use controlled clinical trials when available, but in many cases, data from randomized trials are lacking, such that we often use large case series, preliminary clinical studies, and expert opinion on occasion to generate our papers. Technical data is then gathered from traditional and web-based publications, proprietary publications, and informal communications with pertinent vendors. The technology status evaluation report is then drafted by one or two members of the ASG Technology Committee and reviewed and edited by the entire committee prior to submission to ASGE leadership. Again, I would like to welcome Andy Copland and Sonali Sakaria. They're with me today to discuss their status evaluation report on electrosurgical generators, which will be published in an upcoming issue of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. So with that, Andy, Sonali, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
That's right.
So let's just kind of start with some kind of a basic high level overview. Sonali, why did as a tech committee we feel that now was an opportune time to revise this document?
You know, I think the last document was published in 2013, so there have been advancements, particularly in certain aspects of electrosurgical generators that weren't there previously. You know, and it's always good for those type of advancements to be highlighted. It's so important for us as gastroenterologists, given that endoscopy is such a large part of our practice, for us to really understand how do these new technologies within the electrosurgical generators, how will they affect our practice? How will they affect different choices we make during endoscopy? And how do we deliver the safest care to patients during endoscopy?
Yeah, I think the unique aspect of this particular document, and we have others in a similar vein, but this applies to so many people who essentially anyone who does endoscopy needs to be aware of everything down to the physics behind how the generators work to the various settings. So I think it's an extraordinarily important paper and something that should continue to be grown and developed in subsequent years as the technology continues to evolve. Andy, from your perspective, what do you think were the major highlights? And I'll go to Sonali as well, but what do you think are the major highlights of this paper and things that the reader should really focus on when they open up our document?
I think it's interesting. I think it's a really nice opportunity to go through really basic fundamentals of setting up an electrosurgical generator. And I think the authors from the prior edition did a good job of that. But what we made an effort to do is try to spend some time trying to really create a simple, straightforward way to understand the physics, like you mentioned, as well as the setup. And that can't be overemphasized, right? Like the importance of that basic understanding, because I think there's a lot of discomfort in the gastroenterology community with how these devices work. I think some of the things that we have added to this document that make it different from before and that make it valuable are, number one, trying to add the clinical data that wasn't present before, because there is a little bit of clinical data to color decision making. So particularly around like hot polypectomy, right? There's finally a real randomized control trial to hold up and at least talk about. And then I think the other thing is these electrosurgical generators change, right? And so a lot of times you just have to update what the devices are and update kind of information about them so people can use what's in their unit. I think we accomplished that. The last section I think that is also helpful is we've started to broach the topic of third space, which wasn't really covered in the prior edition. Trying to hit it at a high level, like a conceptual level, that helps kind of armor people for being prepared to enter those kinds of practices. That was a gap that just wasn't really part of the community before.
Fair enough. Sonali, anything you want to add in terms of what you think are some major highlights of the document?
Sure. I mean, I think we tried to simplify the physics behind it. It can be cumbersome and it can be confusing. You kind of have to reach back to college and medical school days to really remember some of the physics behind it. So I think we tried to cover that broadly with like basic concepts. And then as Andy mentioned, I think one highlight is that we do broach on third space endoscopy, which wasn't really covered before. And we also touch a little bit more in depth on safety of electrosurgical generators, particularly with respect to some of the implantable devices that maybe weren't prevalent back in 2013 compared to how they're being used now.
Yeah, that's while there is very little data on what to do with certain implantable devices, I think it's somewhat of perhaps a small elephant in the room that you can't ignore it because we are seeing more and more people with implantable cardiac devices, but also neurostimulators, gastric pacemakers, bladder stimulators. There's a whole bunch of implantable devices that could be interfered with by the generator. I will say, I thought you guys did an exceptional job with the physics part of it. And I think that as you both stated, this really can't be overemphasized because I can tell you, when you're taking out a polyp or you're using a pure cut to place an Axios, when things aren't going well, it's those kind of physics properties that you need to help figure out why. And have you charred the tissue so much that the current density is now a problem, or you're not getting energy that you think you should be getting? Why? Is there a problem with the dispersion pad? So I think that at a very, very high level, you guys did a really good job with that part. I commend you because that is it's not the easiest thing to write about, and certainly not something that any of us are used to writing about. Um, Now, when you think of, now that you're somewhat experts in this topic after this deep dive, where do you see things perhaps in the future going? Do you think we'll continue to see, you know, further changes in generators? Will it just purely be software? Will it be, even faster generators? What do you think has to happen or may happen in the future? I'll start with you, Sonali.
Sure. I think that the microprocessors have been huge in terms of advancing technology for electrosurgical generators. And with the way technology is going, the direction it's headed everywhere, not just in medicine, I think we're really going to see advances in that such that perhaps the sensors in the processors will be quicker to pick up changes in the tissue in resistance, where the processors then quickly or more quickly adapt the settings. And so I think that's going to be huge. I also think that potentially software updates, we will be able to do that with handheld devices rather than, having to change out actual equipment. And so I think those couple of things is where I kind of see for the future of electrosurgical generators.
Andy, any additional thoughts?
I agree. I think that the biggest change in the devices recently has been the microprocessors and the amount of real-time feedback the generator's getting from the tissue and how many decisions can be made kind of per second. The things that I would love to see, like as it evolves in the future, would in some ways be simplicity, because there is an element of these devices where there's so many choices, it's hard to decide how to step on the pedal. And in the end, you have to step on the pedal. And I think that in some ways we have so many choices that it would be helpful to get really clear direction, preferably from high-level clinical studies, really telling us like what's the right thing to do. Or maybe like an example with our polypectomies that maybe it doesn't matter quite as much
Yeah.
as we thought it would, when we're talking about blended currents. And I think that would be a really interesting evolution in the field, because we have a lot of activities we use cautery for all the time, but not
Yeah.
as much clinical data as you'd think.
Yeah, I think, the to Sonali's point about the microprocessor, having these ultra fast microprocessors, they allow us to build these combination currents or specified currents. And I think that one upside, but also downside is just what you said. Now we have so much ability to pinpoint exactly how to make this brand new type of current and this new, and then, it can be overwhelming. So I think overwhelming, 15 years ago was just that you had this giant box in your room that really was just like a couple of buttons and you didn't really know quite what was happening when you used it. Now it's you turn it on and it looks like this beautiful computer and it has so many things you can do with it that's the part of it that's overwhelming. So
Yeah,
I would hope that industry realizes that and says, okay, yes, this is a bit of a playground now, but hopefully we can rein it in and really focus down to make it simple, but also what's going to be the easiest to use for the end user, which is us, and then in turn the safest for the patient. Um, because,
there's
go ahead.
Well, no, I think there's also a lot that the companies can do too. I mean, they really are sort of artists with the waveform too, right? In ways that we can't even control on the front end, or on the back, front end, yeah. And I think there's all kinds of opportunity there too.
I will also say that, because there are so many choices now for us, it is intimidating, I think, for a lot of endoscopists, particularly if they don't understand the physics behind it. So again, it's like if you can't understand the basic physics and concepts behind why you're choosing certain things, you're going to feel even more intimidated by it. So I think having that really basic physics knowledge of how they work and what is current, what is voltage, how is power affecting, you have to know those principles in order to make these choices.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we'll see. I mean, the other part of this that we don't quite know is how alternative energy sources play into this, right? We're starting to see devices that use radiofrequency ablation in more of their devices. We're starting to see some microwave ablation. Um, so it will be interesting how this whole energy space evolves for our careers, moving forward. In the last kind of couple of minutes, in terms of wrapping it up, I always ask the authors kind of what's their favorite aspect of the paper? What did they either get the most enjoyment out of or learn the most from, or just they think people are going to like the most about the document that they put so much time and effort into?
Well, I hope that, one of my favorite aspects was actually the description of the physics behind what is happening. And, I keep coming back to that because I just think it's such an important part as endoscopists. We have to understand that it is the equipment that we're using. And if we don't understand that, it's not safe for our patients. So I hope that we were able to provide a clear and concise description of the physics behind it to help our members understand how the electrosurgical generator is working so that they can make these choices for their patients.
What do you think, Andy?
I Yeah, I agree. I think that there are two things that were really interesting to me. One was the safety data on all the stimulators, because it's interesting to read through some of the legalese about it and understand kind of how you're kind of on the hook for making the right decision about what you think is right for a patient. Because if someone needs cautery and they have a big pain pump there, you're still stuck with the decision that you have to decide, am I going to risk damaging the device? And I think being clear about that and looking at modern information about it was useful. The physics part I really enjoyed, and I think it's really important because what I teach our fellows when they graduate from our program is I want them to be able to walk into an endo unit and see an electrosurgical generator that they don't know, right, that they've never used before, and be able to say, well, this looks like it has a duty cycle of 4%, and it's using, I don't know, 1200 volts or something. And then you can make a guess about what's going to happen when you use the device with that setting. Or similarly, polypectomy settings, like I want you to be able to have enough understanding that you can interpret some things to understand what to expect. It helps you better partner with your reps too, right? For the people who represent those devices and come and help you. You can talk their language a little better, which I think is really useful.
Yeah, completely agree. I thought you guys did an excellent job with a challenging topic because it blends so many things. Like I said, it blends the physics part, it blends um, different commercial entities, clinical information, um, and then, obviously all of the commercial entities have different proprietary waveforms and programs. So it's not the easiest document to write, and it's one of the ones that I've always felt, we did a really good job as a committee, and that starts with the amount of effort that you guys put into it to kind of see this through. So I certainly appreciate your effort. I think it's a really high quality document for the society, and I hope that our readers and membership from ASG enjoy this in the future. With that, I would just like to say thank you to Andy and Sonali for joining me today to discuss their document. Again, this will be in an upcoming issue of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. And with that, we will end the podcast. Thank you guys so much again for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.